Let's talk about the 11 different kinds of personalities that I've observed in the Supermax prison that I worked at that can make or break you. Meaning, if you're a prison guard walking the hallways, what's going to get you hurt and what's going to save your butt if you need to. There's 11 different kinds of staff that work at a prison. And let's get one thing right off the top here. I'm more or less a realist. I like to say things the way they really are, and I don't sugarcoat it. Because at a Supermax prison, you gotta realize what reality is, not what you want it to be. So it's kind of the way I've gone my whole life. Is it doesn't matter what should, it's what is. So let's get that out of the way. Now, some of the different personalities that you run into is the intellectual. We had a guy that used to be a captain in the Marine Corps, a well-educated leader, very detail-oriented, terrific planner. I mean, if you have a project, you really needed that guy to help you plan it out. He's the guy that I spoke with quite often about my upcoming entrepreneurial project. I wanted to start a business, and he was actually a customer of the business, and owing to his observational skills and reasoning, I asked him lots and lots of questions about why he was a customer, what he thought would be improved on, that kind of thing. So he was a very intellectual guy. Now, the problem with these guys are, in most cases, yes, he's an intellectual, he can plan, he can direct, but to actually carry it out and fill in all the little blanks, like, he's a broad view kind of guy, the guy that looks down from 2 miles up and he looks at the big picture. And to run a business like the one that I have, you need to get into the weeds and, who do I write a check to and for how much and how should I pay for this and that kind of thing. They're really not into that. So there's that guy. And then there's the entrepreneur. And I've run into several of them. I think I fall into this category, at least partially. It's the guy that, he comes to work, he does his job, he goes home, and his real ambitions in life is away from the prison. So he wants to own a business, he wants to, build and rent houses or build houses or do tree trimming, own a shop that repairs whatever it is that he wants to repair, that kind of thing. There's that guy, the entrepreneur, and I've run into a bunch of them. I'm one. I did mine in real estate. I have met other people that they did their stuff in real estate. Like one guy, he built a trailer park. I mean, a whole trailer park. It's located in Carterville, Illinois. And this guy, he got the land cleared, got water to the place, power, made these little pads so that people could park their trailers there, or mobile homes. I call them trailers, and live there. And then he collected a small amount of rent for the use of his land. And, they mowed the grass and took care of it, as you would for your house. And he just provided the rent on the land. They own the actual trailer in themselves. And, if eventually they stopped paying, he could seize all their property. He had a great idea, and he made millions. And I have a video about how to make millions and how to learn from prison to make your business work or your life. Then the next guy is the suck ass, the show off. Now, there's another guy that kind of goes along with him, and he's the backstabber. But there can be just plain old backstabbers and just plain old suck-ass show-offs. Now, the suck-ass show-off, what he does is he uses other people's ideas and then touts them as his own. And I'm not saying that these personalities are only in prison. I mean, they're everywhere. I'm sure corporate America has this guy. And what happens is you'll have a guy that will come up with something, and nobody really likes his idea because he's not really a marketer. He can't really market his idea, or he is not he's not in a position to tell the right people. Like he can't get the warden's ear, he can't get the director's ear, or the regional director's ear. So his idea falls flat. But when somebody had heard his idea, and what they do is that they take it to the right people and tell them it's his original idea and what a great guy he is. Or every time something goes right, he takes credit for it. So if there's starting to be a riot in a cell house, and me and Billy Bob over there, we quell it quickly, the suck-ass calls up the lieutenant and says, "Oh my God, there was almost a riot in here, but I stopped it." Yeah, he never left the office, that kind of thing. So, and then it goes along with the backstabber. Now, the backstabber, he is a guy that goes around and makes sure that if anything ever goes wrong, even if he did it, he makes sure to blame it on somebody loudly, and he's the guy that runs into the lieutenant's office or the associate warden's office and says, "Oh, do you know what Billy Bob did? Oh my God, it was terrible." And he tells like he lost the keys, but I found him right away, and that kind of thing. But he makes sure that everyone around him is dragged down so that he can get the next promotion. And he's the jealous kind too. If you mix him with the other guy, there's another guy too called the racist. The backstabber and the racist, sometimes they're the same guy. What he does, he says, "Well, I'm a fill in the blank, white guy, black guy, Hispanic, whatever he is, Asian, whatever. And I would have gotten promoted if it wasn't for those," and then fill in the other blank, those white guys, those black guys. So I'm a white guy, and a real reason I didn't get promoted is because those black guys are a better suck ass than me, and I'm going to try to do something to make them look bad. So his real motivation is to move up in the world, but he mixes it with his racism. And yes, I've worked with at least one white guy and one black guy that were just, my goodness, these guys could have been in any racist organization. They were even sympathetic to the racist gangs that we had on the inside, as long as their racism coincided with their own. So the black guy, he was kind of into the Black Guerrilla family, and the white guy, he thought the KKK and the Aryan Brotherhood and stuff was his people, that kind of thing. And they would come right out and say, the black guy, when he would talk to me, at least every other paragraph he would have to mention that I'm white. And you probably wouldn't understand because you're white. That kind of thing. And it would just be constant with him. And then the other guy, the white guy, the one that was really racist, is that every problem that he had somehow could be routed to black people were the cause of it. And it was like, wow. It's like you just don't quite grasp, but maybe some of these things are your own fault. Then there's the sadist. The sadist is the guy that can get you killed because he loves to cause other people pain. He's the guy that will beat the inmate to death. He's the guy that will, and this happened too, a guy, I didn't realize what was happening, and neither did I think the other couple of guys that I was working with, but we were in I unit, which was then called the hole. And you go there for, your problem, so we put you in the hole. And you don't have a TV, and you just sit in your cell and you stare at the floor. So I thought that the toilet had broken because this guy says, "Hey man, you got to use this bucket, You can't use the toilet. You have to use this bucket. And I was like, oh my God, man. So if I had to actually poop, I went to another cell house. But if you wanted to urinate, you could just urinate in a 5-gallon bucket. And that's kind of what we did. And so after a shift or two, I don't remember how long this went on, but he got quite a large bucket of urine. And then he picked it up and he went down the range and he flung it on an inmate who had thrown something on him before. So he was just getting revenge, but he just took great delight in doing stuff like that. He would shut off the inmates' water. They give him a little hassle, so he would turn off their water. Or he would, he took great pleasure in this one. He took a needle and poked it into the coaxial cable and broke it off, so that unless you really actually knew the spot that he had done that with, the cable had to be replaced. And it interfered with these people's television viewing. We had like 4 channels. And if you got nothing to do all day and you sit in your cell for 23 hours, you probably want to watch television. Well, he would wreck that for them so they couldn't. And it was just kind of a fun thing for him to do. And that's the kind of guy that can get you killed too. Now there's the loser. And the loser kind of goes with the other one, the victim. The victim is, I'm getting a divorce, and the courts are against me, and I'm going to lose custody or primary custody of my children, and all my money is gone. And I went and I took my car to go get it repaired, but now it's going to cost 5 times what I thought it would. I'm going to do something like sell my car and trade it in and get a new car, but now for some reason I gyrated around and now I own 2 cars and I can't afford them. And so I'm going to sell the brand new one that I just got at a huge loss. And it's like, oh my God, every week there's this guy and the same guy will tell you the most ridiculous stories, just out of this world insanity stories. Like, how do you deal with this? Like, my wife and my family, they're going to run away and they're going to take the kids and they're not going to tell me where they went. And, it's like, so when you get home from work, you'll have no kids and stuff. Well, yeah, that's what they're saying. And then they're calling him at work, aggravating him. So instead of having this guy, worry about shutting the doors when I ask him to, or make sure that something is locked when it's supposed to be, his mind is way off somewhere. Because he's a victim. Everybody's out to get him, and he drives this old piece of crap car because he don't have any money. And you could give him $200,000 a year and he'd never have any money, because he does stuff like buy all of his groceries at the convenience store because it's too hard to drive all the way into work or all the way into the big town. So he buys it at the convenience store to save money on gas. And it's like, oh yeah, you saved money on gas, but you just paid twice what it costs for milk and eggs if you would have spent $1 extra in gas. It's like, and then there's the coward, the guy that when you really need help, chips are down, he'll panic, he'll run away. I've seen him run in circles. Literally, the guy ran in circles while I'm in a physical altercation with somebody. And me and a guy's punching the hell out of each other. And this guy is running in circles. And he's mumbling, help, help, what do I do? As he runs in circles. I'm telling you, he was running in circles. And finally, I have to scream at him to open the front door, since he had the keys. And he's not going to help me. So at least if he opened the front door, some people could get in and respond to the alarm, and they could assist me. Now, I'll tell you, people like that. Some days, on a rare occasion, they are as fearless as a lion. So I have seen the super brave at some point turn coward and run, and I've seen the normal coward one day just leap over furniture and attack somebody, that's twice their size. So the coward isn't always the coward. Now there's the other guy called the leader. And the leader, he's usually a standout guy. He's the guy with the different kind of haircut. He's the fellow that you or other people naturally want to follow because he's decisive. He's probably been in prison for a long time. He's been around. He knows the system and how it works and the ins and outs of the prisoners, and he can tell you, no, don't do that. Do it this way. Or yes, you can get that done, but don't do it the way you're doing it. Do it this other way. Or when people are injured, he's the guy that's on the radio directing the rescue. Guy fell down the stairs outside on the yard and he's way at the bottom of a hole. Fine. We got to get him out of the hole and we got to get him to the hospital. So you, and you three guys, I want you to head out there to the hole right now. And you, the fourth guy, I want you to come with me and we're going to get the litter off of the wall in the lieutenant's office, and we're going to go out there and meet those other guys, and we're all going to get together, and we're going to get this fellow out of this hole. We're going to get him up here, and let's call into the supervisor's office and make sure that we got an ambulance on the way. And everybody does their part, and this fellow directs the whole thing, and it works out the way it should. So those are the kind of personalities that you meet inside of a prison, and you got to know which ones to avoid, which ones not to trust at all, and the ones that you're going to have to rely upon. And that's really what it's like working inside of that Supermax penitentiary. It's not the physical location. It's not the bars and the concrete walls and the fence with the razor wire. What really makes it the prison, what the experience is working with the staff that is your coworkers and the supervisors and the doctors, the lawyers that are there, all the people that you interact with. That's what really makes it the workplace. And that's what, when I retired like 12 years ago, that's what I remember the most, is not the physical plant, but the actual humans that I worked with. Now, if anybody's interested, I've got my opinion of the different types of inmates that you meet inside of a prison, but I can only tell you from my side of the bars. If you would like to know about something like that, put it in the comments. And if you like this video or podcast, whichever I happen to put this on, hit the like button, give me a 5-star review, make a comment, and subscribe.